right, welcome to the exam 2 review. So the exam date is going to be next week on Tuesday. It's during the lab session. As with last time, we are going to be starting at 11:30. It's going to be an hour and a half, and then there will be additional time to upload the quiz, or sorry, upload the exam. It's going to be the same amount as before. So this general stuff at the beginning of this presentation is the same as last time. You can use whatever calculator you want. The equation sheet is provided. It is up now. Have whatever you need for writing and erasing purposes nearby. For taking the exam, again, this is an individual exam. This is closed notes. You are not allowed to use your notes for the exam. You can use your own personal equation sheet, but that is it. In general, you do need to show work for the true, false, and multiple choice. You don't need to show any work for those, but for problem solving, you do need to show work. As with last time, if you are not printing out the exam, true, false, and multiple choice can be on the same page. Just make sure that the questions are very clearly labeled, and each problem solving question must be on its own page. You don't have to print it. You are allowed to do it on whatever paper you want to. You are allowed to do it digitally if you want to. If you are doing it digitally and typing, again, you must show work. If you just have an answer and it's wrong, I can't give you partial credit for that. So please make sure that if you are typing it, you are showing as much work as you would if you were hand doing it. In general, you guys were pretty good about your work being legible for the first exam, so I would like you to keep that up. Same concepts, or not same concepts, same way it's set up before: 7 true, false, 7 multiple choice, 3 problem solving questions. As we move forward, there will be a couple of things that are labeled as conceptual. For those, they will be in the true, false, multiple choice only. So again, I'm a big believer in partial credit. Some of you for the last exam didn't even try for some questions. If you had drawn a picture, you would have at least gotten 2 points for that. So even if you have zero idea with how to solve a question, spend some time thinking about how you can write out the knowns and unknowns with the correct variables. What do you think the equation is? You're not going to lose points for guessing a wrong equation. Draw me a picture. If you are going to go through and solve, show your work. This is especially bad for students who typed their solutions last time. If you want to have multiple pages, one where it's handwritten out and one where you've typed up some of the steps, that is perfectly valid. Do that. Show me the work that you have done on this exam. So I want to talk about the course outcomes that are listed on the syllabus because they've changed from last time we talked about them. So explain the course concepts of forces. This time we've covered the entirety of forces. We've been talking about motion essentially this entire time, so that's still there. We've now talked about momentum and energy. Problem solving using vectors when it comes to what we've been focusing on since last exam. Forces and momentum are vectors. Pre-calculus level, so probably not going to have a problem solving question that has calculus in it, associated with forces, motion, momentum, and energy. Again, motion is related to forces, momentum, and energy. So if you can look at some of the key words that are bolded here, you can probably guess the 3 types of problem-solving questions you'd have. Probably something related to forces, momentum, and energy. Probably. And then you'll need to critically analyze the connection between calculus and physics. However, it explicitly says that you need the appropriate skill sets at the pre-calculus level. So if there is something calculus related, it'll probably be in the conceptual portion of the exam. So let's go ahead and go through the chapter. So this is broken up similar to last time. I tell you the sections to look at and these sections to ignore. So we talked very briefly about interaction diagrams, and I said we're not going to be looking at them in class. So go ahead and ignore those. Know how to do Newton's third law. Know how ropes and pulleys work in these problems, and then how to move on an incline. So an incline is fair game for this exam. However, understand it probably won't be as complicated as that quiz where I had 2 inclines with 2 different angles and all that stuff. It won't be that complicated, but you may have a single incline that you have to deal with. We didn't cover chapter 8, so please do not study chapter 8. For chapter 9, this was our introduction into energy. So this is where we looked at work. Don't worry about any proofs. There were a lot of proofs that we very briefly covered since last exam. Never worry about those. So don't worry about the proof for work and kinetic energy, the work done by a spring. We didn't talk about power, but you can ignore that. Understand how work and kinetic energy are related. So know it's the total net work that changes the kinetic energy of an object. Know how to calculate work in all of its ways. Dot product, area under the curve, an integral, the magnitudes and the angle. All 4 of those you need to be able to do. You're not going to be using thermal energy in conjunction with the work energy principle, but this is where it is introduced. Chapter 10 was our conservation of energy chapter. So you should know the different types of potential energies and when you need to use them. Know how to choose a smart y is equal to 0. For the conservation of energy, be able to do it for both the ideal and non-ideal cases. In the conceptual portion of the exam, you might have an energy diagram, and you might have a question about conservative and non-conservative forces. Ignore any of the proofs for potential energy, and ignore the relationship between force and potential energy. So that was our derivatives. We're not going to focus on that at all. We talked about it. We're not going to be using it. Chapter 11 was our conservation of momentum chapter. So understand what momentum and impulse are and how they are related. Be able to do conservation of momentum in both 1 and 2 dimension, and know the different types of collision. So if we have a perfectly elastic collision, that means that kinetic energy is conserved. And if we have a perfectly inelastic collision, that means our 2 objects are going to stick together. So know how to use both of those in both 1 and 2 dimensions. We didn't talk about reference frames or rocket propulsion, so we're going to be able to skip those 2 sections. Explosions are kind of boring when you can't look at them with rocket propulsion, so we're just going to skip that for the exam. Now remember, we did go back to chapter 4. Either remember, or if you haven't watched Wednesday's lecture, we're going back to chapter 4. This is going to be in the conceptual portion of the exam only. The same is true for this as well for the next slide. And the reason for that is, yeah, we talked about it, but it's kind of problem solving wise, we can't do anything interesting with it yet, because I'm uncomfortable putting something on the exam for 20 points when you've never tried it for grade purposes before. So understand the difference between uniform and non-uniform circular motion. Know how to use angular variables, so theta, omega, alpha. We already did projectile motion, so skip that. We never talked about relative motion. We're still not going to talk about relative motion, so you can skip that as well. But again, so with this chapter 4 material, conceptual portion only. So maybe you have the kinematic equations, but it's just a conceptual question, so a true, false, or multiple choice question. In Chapter 12, these are the sections we will, in theory, have covered before the exam. This is on Monday's lecture, so the day before the exam. Again, I'm not comfortable giving you anything that's worth a lot of points for this because you will have seen it for a day. So if there is anything from Chapter 12, it will be in the conceptual portion of the exam. There is a chance nothing from Chapter 12 will be on the exam. That's just going to, 4, fair game. 12, if there's something, it will be a grand total of less than 5 points out of 100 based on this chapter. So I would not stress about Chapter 12 at all. All right, so this is the Exam 2 review. The material has already been posted with all of the solutions for studying purposes, so definitely check those out. I do still need to, as of recording this video, I do still need to make the videos for the 2 questions that you guys voted for in multiples. So I will be doing those. They will probably be going up Wednesday or Thursday, depending on exactly how fast I can get some other stuff worked on. But yeah, if you have any questions about Exam 2, please reach out and ask.